Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we're looking to find the best of just enjoyable fun books of all genres. And today we're reviewing the book All System Red. All Systems Red by Martha Wells. And this is a short novel. It's not even 150 pages. Very tiny. But it's a sci-fi and it's a lot of fun. So, as I said, the genre is sci-fi, although I would also add in there's suspense, thriller, kind of a little bit of a mystery as well, action. That would be kind of the genre this is. Okay, the plot. So we start out getting kind of thrown into the things. We're first person point of view from the character. He calls himself Murderbot. He's not a human. He's not an augmented human, but he's also not a robot. Something kind of in between. It sounds like we kind of get throughout the story hints of this. He's partially organic, partially robotic, so he can have the emotions and feelings of a human, but he has the processing and mechanical of a robot. So like all his limbs are mechanical, for example, and he can think faster because he's got digital processing for working through things. He can be repaired like a robot, including some of his organic bits, as long as his brain is still okay. But he's not quite considered a robot because he isn't so concretely, structured like a robot. He can think. Anyway, we start out from his point of view. He calls himself Murderbot, and he has hacked his module that forces him to do certain things. So he's become an independent robot, you might say. I don't know what else to call him, so I'm going to call him a robot, even though that's not quite what he is. But he's now independent. He can do what he wants, when he wants. He can ignore commands and his other programming if he chooses to. But he doesn't really have ambition at this point in the book. He's just like, I'll just continue doing what I was doing, which was being a security robot for this small company of, I think it's 8 humans, who are out surveying a planet. So his original purpose was to be their security guard, walk the perimeter, make sure they don't do anything stupid, make sure that there's no interpersonal conflict that's going to erupt into violence, that kind of thing. So that's his purpose. And so he just continues to do that. And then there were some problems in their surveying situation. Some of them just seem to be glitchy type of things that happen because it's cheap equipment doing, things from the lowest bidder. Things will glitch out here and there. But there's another survey team from another company on the other side of the planet, and they lose contact with this other group, and they're like, that's kind of suspicious. So they go over there to find this other group and discover that they're pretty much all dead. And the rest of the book is them, realizing that the people that killed this other group are also after them. And what do they do about this? How do they survive? If they can figure out who is doing what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, how they're doing what they're doing, and how can they, not be killed. So that's kind of the plot of the book. It's a little bit like a mystery in the who, what, when, where, why. Questions have to be answered, but it's not a mystery in the sense that you're expected as a reader to be able to solve an actual mystery. Instead, it's more like you just follow along as they uncover bits and pieces, and you just know what they know. There's nothing hidden that they give you clues at that you would solve later, really. It's mostly just, here it is as we uncover what is going on. But there's a lot of suspense in that, you feel that hunted sense of some unknown entity out to get you. Okay, so things I like about this book. So I really, really liked Murderbot, our main character. He was a really great character. He's not all powerful. Even as he's got guns built into his arms and stuff, and he could be repaired, but it certainly gives you the impression throughout this that he could easily be taken out. He also has, so his personality is kind of funny. He's very shy. So when he interacts with humans, he's just like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. I really don't. And like somebody will ask him about his feelings and he will go and face a wall to be like, I am totally disengaging with this. I don't want anything to do with this. Stop talking to me. What he really wants to do, he really just wants to sit back in his bunk, his cubicle, and watch soap operas. Like that is what he wants to do with his life. But he's not a bad person in completely indifferent to what's going on around him. I mean, he really does seem to care, even though he's also kind of like, I don't know why I care, but I just do. And he keeps trying to protect his group of people. And he does end up really liking some of these people, these humans. Now, he really doesn't want to talk about his feelings with them or his future or anything like that, but he does want the humans to be safe. It makes him feel uncomfortable, the idea that they would die. So he's like, I am going to prevent that to the best of my ability. So he just comes across as a really good character, really good guy that you would be like, wow, I want good things to happen for him. The other characters, so your 8 humans that he's protecting, you get to know them a little bit, not really in depth like you do Murderbot, but the other ones, which are, you've got some really diverse characters as far as personality goes and what their interests are and how they interact with Murderbot. Like, are they really, feeling like he's basically a person? Do they treat him more like he's a robot? Are they suspicious of him? There's a whole variety of responses to what's going on, and that's great for this. I like the way the author dealt with these other humans. The mystery part was good in that you were really engaged in trying to wonder what exactly is going on here. Why is this all happening? Who is doing this? How are they doing it? It was interesting. You kept wanting to do it or follow along. The suspense part was also, it was an adrenaline rush. You were constantly like, oh wow, this is like high octane, you're being hunted, you're needing to hide, you're needing to outwit, that kind of thing. That's all fun. So yes, I really liked that. There were a tiny handful of things that I disliked, so I'll mention that. One of which is the book is too short. You really just want it to keep going, which is a good thing. Maybe it just, is incentivizing me to read the next book of the series, which I want to do. So yes, too short. I will say the climactic scene, the very end of the story where the good guys are finally, escaping from the bad guys, basically. There is, we'll just say, it's the start of a fight, and Murderbot basically gets knocked out. And then he wakes up, and all is well, and he's being repaired, and they've all escaped the planet. It kind of felt like the author was like, well, I'm done with this story now, let's wrap it up. It was the very, very end of the story that was the climax of the story I would consider wimpy. It should have been a little bit longer, more drawn out to get it feeling like that satisfying ending. I still liked it. It just was kind of like, it was kind of a weak moment there in the story. Another thing is just a minor thing. So they defeat, specifically Murderbot, defeats a monster at the very beginning. If you've ever seen the movie Tremors, that's the kind of monster. Some sort of underground digging thing. And I kind of thought that this monster would have some further moment in the story. Some further use. Because it seems like this monster should have been utilized in some way. It was almost one of those things where they made a big deal out of something and then drop it. So you didn't have to. It was just one of the things that I felt like the author should have, used it as a trap for the bad guys or something, and it just never came up again. And the only other thing, minor nitpicky thing, is All right, so there's no romance in this whatsoever of any kinds for any characters, and that's great because our murder bot is kind of like, I do not have those kind of feelings, and he doesn't want anything to do with that. He, fast forwards through that on his soap operas, because he's like, I don't want, no. But it's very much in the background, lots of polygamous marriages going on, which, it's kind of like, that's part of their world building, that I just was like, meh. Although coming back to world building, that was something that I did like. I did like the world building, generally speaking. Not necessarily that little thing that was only like mentioned twice and totally ignorable, but the world building about the universe itself, the different corporations that seem to have control, but yet they're not, everything falls apart because, everybody does cheap stuff. The universe that designed Murderbot and his compatriots, and how they're structured as far as, basically slaves. And even if they're free, there are some areas where these units can be considered free and people, but even that, they must have a human guardian. They can't just be wandering around doing whatever they want. So it's an interesting world building, I think. I thought that they did a good job with that. So overall, I loved the book. Totally, highly recommend it. I think everyone should read it. It's going to be on my list. I am going to go and read the next one at some point, and probably even review it. Yeah. So that's it for that. Part 2. What I'm going to read next. I decided I'm going to go do another fantasy, but a children's fantasy, Peter Pan. So I have read this before. I read this as I want to say it was either high school or college age, relatively adult person. And I read it once with my kids, although I think they were too young at the time I read it to them. I don't think that they really remember. And I had to do some modification I was reading to get them to understand what was going on. But anyway, I'll talk more about it next time. I hope you join me, and thank you for watching.